Have you ever met someone where everything felt completely ordinary, and yet what stayed with you didn't feel ordinary at all? Not the kind that overwhelms you, not something you can name right away. Just a brief pause, a quiet moment of attention that you didn't even mean to give. And then, later, after everything has already passed, you realize you're still thinking about them for no clear reason. For Aquarius, that can feel unfamiliar, because you're used to understanding things before you allow yourself to step in. But this time, it feels like something inside you is moving a step ahead of your mind, not rushed, not clearly defined, but just enough to make you stop and wonder, what is this really? And maybe it's from that very question that something quietly different is beginning to unfold. Do you know that feeling? When you meet someone and everything seems completely normal, nothing big enough to call special, no lingering glance, no moment where time seems to pause, just a conversation, a few simple words, a brief presence. And yet, somehow, after you walk away, something stays, not clear, not something you can name, just there. And what unsettles you the most is that you don't know why. There's no strong reason to remember, no detail that truly stands out. And still, you remember, like a very soft melody, you're not trying to listen, but it keeps playing somewhere in the background of your mind. For Aquarius, this isn't the most comfortable place to be. You tend to see the world through understanding. You observe, you analyze, you connect the dots until everything makes sense. You believe in clarity. Yeah, you look for meaning, but this feeling doesn't follow any pattern you recognize. It offers no explanation, no evidence. It doesn't even ask anything from you. It simply exists, quiet, but present enough to make you notice. Something inside you is shifting. Maybe this isn't a big connection the way you once imagined. Not the kind that turns your whole world upside down. It's more like a small door, just slightly open. No one is pushing you to step in. There's no urgent call. It's just there. And you see it. And in a very still moment, you realize you're standing in front of something you haven't experienced in quite this way before. There's no need to explain it right away. No need to understand it all at once. Just noticing that some connections in life don't come to be analyzed. They come to be felt. Yes, and maybe what makes it meaningful isn't how clearly you can define it, but the way it reaches you, even before you have the words for it. You're used to thinking before you allow yourself to feel. Everything that passes through you usually finds its place in a clear, organized order. You observe, you analyze, you keep just enough distance, so nothing pulls you in too quickly. Not because you're distant, but because you understand the value of not losing yourself in emotions you haven't fully understood yet. And then, this person appears. And in a very natural way, they don't fit into any of the patterns you've used to understand others before. You try to observe them, but nothing feels clear enough to draw a conclusion. You try to make sense of it, but everything just slips beyond what you're used to. They don't try to be interesting. They don't try to stand out. They don't carry a perfected version of themselves. They simply show up, very ordinary, and yet they catch your attention in a way that isn't ordinary at all. There's something about them that doesn't need effort and still makes you feel at ease. A kind of ease that doesn't come from saying the right things at the right time, but from the feeling that you don't have to be right when you're around them. And for you, that's rare. You begin to notice, this time, your mind isn't the only one leading anymore. It hasn't disappeared. It's still there. But somehow, it's stepping back, just a little, making space for something softer, slower, harder to name. You're not sure what it means. You're not sure where it's going, but you notice something small. You're no longer rushing to find an answer. And maybe what surprises you the most isn't the other person, but the way you're slowly allowing yourself to experience a connection without needing to understand it right from the beginning. Like sitting quietly beside a song you've never heard before. You don't know where it's going to take you. And still, you choose to stay, just to listen a little longer. And then, There comes a moment when you find yourself sitting alone and you realize that feeling is still there. It hasn't grown in any loud or obvious way. It doesn't take over your thoughts, but it hasn't disappeared either. It stays like a very soft layer beneath everything, like the last light of the day resting on a wall. Not bright enough to catch your attention right away, but just enough to make the whole space feel different. And you begin to wonder, why this person? Not because they meet any of the standards you once set, not because they did something unforgettable, but because when you're around them, you don't have to try to be anyone else. A strange kind of familiarity, not coming from a clear memory, not tied to any specific story, just familiar, like walking into a place you've never been before, and yet you breathe a little easier, as if your body recognizes something before your mind has time to understand. For Aquarius, this isn't easy to accept right away. You're used to things having a source, a reason, a clear explanation. But this time, the feeling comes first. You don't know where it began. You're not sure where it's leading. And still, you notice something. When you're in that presence, you soften, not excitement, not joy in the usual sense. But something much rarer, a quiet within you that feels more settled. And in that quiet, you begin to hear more clearly the things you used to overlook, the thoughts you once pushed aside, the emotions you labeled as not important, the smallest signals that you were once too busy to face. This person isn't trying to change you. They don't come with answers, and yet, somehow, their presence changes the way you listen to yourself. You begin to notice the pauses, the subtle reactions, the fleeting feelings you used to explain away and move past too quickly. And maybe this isn't the kind of connection that's meant to do something big. It feels more like a very gentle adjustment, soft, slow, but enough to shift the way you see the world, a little more open, a little deeper. And within that change, or so quiet that almost no one else would notice, you begin to understand. Not everything meaningful in life needs a clear reason from the very beginning. And then, from that very softness, a familiar question begins to return. Not loud, not overwhelming, but clear enough that you can't ignore it. Who is this person to me? Where is this going? You're not asking out of passing curiosity. You're asking because you're used to needing direction. You want to know where you stand in this story. You want to understand their place, and your own. And yet, this time, there's something quiet inside you that doesn't rush for an answer the way it used to. Not because you don't care, but because you're beginning to see that some things, the more you try to define them too early, the more you risk losing what they really are. Like when you try to name a feeling too quickly, you end up shaping it into something familiar, when in truth, it was meant to be experienced in its own way. You can still ask questions, you can still think, but maybe you don't have to resolve everything right now. There's no need to label this connection, no need to decide if it's right or wrong, important or just passing. You can simply let it exist without forcing it to become a definition. And for you, that isn't easy, because you've always been someone who looks for clarity in a world that keeps shifting. You're used to understanding so you can feel safe, but maybe this time, safety is coming from somewhere else, from not pushing things to move faster than they're meant to. You begin to learn how to slow down, not because you're lost, but because something in you trusts that things will reveal themselves when the moment is right. A quiet kind of trust. No need to prove it, no need to guarantee anything, like sitting beside an open window, not trying to predict which way the wind will blow, just feeling it as it arrives. And in that slowing down, you notice something. You're more present than you've been in a long time, not pulled back into the past to compare, not pushed forward into the future to worry. Just here, right now, where the feeling is still intact, not yet analyzed, not yet shaped by rushed conclusions. And maybe what surprises you the most is that you're beginning to feel at ease with not knowing. You no longer see it as a space that needs to be filled, but as an open field where something can slowly take form in the most natural way. Because some things in life are not meant to be understood right away. They're meant to be experienced, to walk alongside you for a while, before you realize what they were really there for. And sometimes, not rushing to understand everything is exactly how you protect something genuine in a world that keeps asking for clarity far too soon. And then, when you stop trying to understand everything right away, something else begins to happen. Very gently. So subtle. You almost don't notice it at first. You stop preparing for every conversation. You stop thinking about what you should say to sound better or more right. You begin to show up as you are. No need to edit yourself too much. No need to hold your image so tightly. And the strange thing is, nothing falls apart when you do that. This person doesn't leave. They don't change the way they see you. They're still there, just as they were before, not trying to understand you too quickly, not placing you into any kind of mold, just there. A presence that doesn't demand, doesn't rush, doesn't make you prove anything. And for you, that can feel unfamiliar, because you've been used to maintaining balance in every connection, knowing when to move closer, when to step back, knowing how to protect yourself before anything goes too far. But this time, you begin to notice you don't need to control things the way you used to. Not because you've let your guard down, but because you feel safe in a very natural way. Not the kind of safety built through logic, but something that rises from within, like exhaling a long breath, and realizing you don't have to hold yourself together so tightly anymore. You're still you, just a little lighter, not because the other person changed you, but because you're no longer trying to maintain a certain version of yourself. And in that space, a different kind of connection begins to form. Not loud, not filled with words, just the ease of being near each other, without needing to create anything special. This may not be the kind of story that draws attention, not something you feel the need to tell everyone about. And yet, it's something that makes you think more deeply about how you've opened your heart in the past, about the layers of protection you've carried for so long. And for the first time in a long while, you find yourself wondering, could connection be simpler than you once believed? Not through trying to be perfect, not through understanding everything, but through allowing yourself to be there as honestly as you are, and trusting that sometimes that alone is already enough for something to begin. And maybe, after everything you've just moved through, what remains isn't a clear answer, but a feeling subtle enough to let you know you're standing at the edge of something new. There's no need to name it right away, no need to understand all of it, because not everything needs to be explained the moment it appears, and not every emotion needs to be fully analyzed to hold meaning. You may be used to looking for certainty, a direction, a conclusion, but this time, what you might need isn't an answer, but space. A space wide enough to let things unfold at their own pace. That different feeling may not be here to change your life overnight. It may not be here to promise anything at all. It's simply a very quiet sign that you're opening to an experience you may not have allowed yourself to enter in this way before. There's no need to rush into belief, and no need to rush into doubt. You don't have to force yourself to feel more or understand faster. Just be there. Stay with that feeling a little longer. Notice how it shifts over time, how it comes, then fades, then returns again, in its own way. And maybe one day, when you look back, you'll begin to understand why it all began the way it did. But that understanding won't come from trying to figure it out from the start. It will come from the patience you gave yourself to walk alongside it, without needing to control every step. Because some things in life only become clear after you've lived through them, after you've allowed yourself to feel first and understand later. And if you are an Aquarius and you find yourself somewhere in this story, then maybe you're not the only one. Some journeys happen very quietly. Some emotions don't need to be spoken to be deeply real. And sometimes, just knowing that somewhere, someone else is moving through something similar can be enough to help you breathe a little easier. Not because everything has become clear, but because you understand. You don't have to understand everything right now to keep moving forward.